You're listening to Confessions of a Bookkeeper, where we look at businesses through the eyes of their books. My name is Mark, your Chief Bookkeeping Officer, and I spent years cleaning up and reviewing some, let's say, interesting books. In this episode, we'll be talking about what happens when the only steady thing inside a business is something outside of it. It's bookkeeping. A consulting company goes through leadership changes, turnover, and reinvention, but through it all, the books stay constant. This is a story about continuity, stability, and what it means to hold the line when everything else keeps shifting. Almost 4 years ago, we took on a new client, that consulting company, with a lot of moving parts to it. Project work, of course, but tons of recurring work, retainers, subcontractors, travel expense, 100 employees. The kind of operation where accounts receivable and accounts payable never sleep. 1,000 invoices every month, dozens of accounts feeding into their QuickBooks account, corporate cards everywhere, and a small in-house finance group that handled accruals and approvals while a single bookkeeper kept the wheels turning. And then their bookkeeper quit, abruptly. A couple days notice, and poof, they were gone. If you ever lived through a moment like that, you know the feeling. It's not panic exactly, it's that slow sinking awareness that the only person who knows where half of the skeletons are kept is walking out of the door at Friday at 5 p.m. My first contact from that company was an in-house finance executive. He called and said, "We need a bookkeeper now." He made overtures that we were in a competitive atmosphere, but I could almost tell right off the bat that wasn't exactly true. We won the engagement, of course, and our scope was quite straightforward. We keep the books. This company had 2 in-house people running AR and AP, and they wanted to keep those accruals and FP&A inside. Totally fine by us. We're happy to be just the backbone of their accounting operations. They would continue to handle estimates, project revenue timing, and forecasting. We would reconcile, classify, close, and report cleanly, consistently, and on time. The first 2 months were smooth. Good rhythm, clear approvals, a healthy back and forth with their staff. It felt like we'd come in at exactly the right time to replace exactly the right role. There's a sweet spot where the outside bookkeeper and the in-house finance share the load without stepping on each other. We were in that. We were definitely in the zone, per se. And then our primary contact, the finance exec who brought us in, left the company. No handoff to us, no transition playbook. No, here's where the spreadsheets are and these are the formulas we use to true up revenue. None of that. I'm sure he gave notice internally, we just didn't get the baton pass. And it happens more often than you think because, again, we are outside the company and executive change is rather sensitive information. The strange thing about moments like this is how quickly you realize who actually knows the company's accounting operations. For about 6 weeks after that departure, I'm fairly certain we were the only people who knew the logic behind certain adjustments, the accrual templates, we had those copies, bill coding conventions, we were the ones enforcing them, and the monthly close checklist, that's still us. This is one of those truths you don't understand until you see it. External bookkeepers, when they do their job right, become the institutional memory of the finance function of a company, not because we're smarter than anyone else, but because we're the only ones who didn't leave. We're not in the building. We're not tied to the internal politics, the restructures, the performance reviews. We just keep showing up, reconciling your bank feeds, clearing suspense accounts, and sending the month-end package. It's unglamorous, yet it's invaluable. An interim CFO stepped in, a good person, very sharp, experienced, professional, the kind of consultant who lives for the messy middle, the rebuild, the triage. That's what interim CFOs do. They walk into moments of chaos and try to calm the storm. But this time I could see it was taking its toll. We'd have meetings and you can see it in his face. The spreadsheets, the catch-up calls, the daily firefighting. It was heavy lifting, even for someone used to crisis work. This one was a lot. And it's understandable. The company was changing fast and he had to learn faster. And when you're in the middle of that as a contractor, you carry the stress of ownership without any of the security of it. Still, we kept the books moving. We were the steady background noise, reconciling, coding, preparing reports, all the while leadership was trying to find their footing. Then after about 4.5 months, the interim CFO rolled off and a new permanent finance executive came in-house. He was bright, clearly talented, with a pedigree that gave everyone immediate confidence. Within a week, you could feel the mood shift. People were genuinely relieved. There was a sense of the turbulence might finally settle down. And at first, it did. Meetings felt lighter, direction clearer, and for a brief moment, everyone seemed aligned again. But new leadership always brings new ideas, and those new ideas came with a wave of change. This company, like most consulting businesses, was people heavy. Projects, teams, approval, all dependent on who sat where. So when leadership changed, so did almost everyone else. The contractors who had been handling ARAP were strong, both seasoned veterans in the accounting world, and coincidentally, the CFO had worked with them before. You could tell he liked them, but the workload was something else. This wasn't light accounting, it was high volume, hundreds of transactions a week, and constant internal approvals and change orders from clients. We started to notice the signs of fatigue on their staff: delayed replies, slower handoffs, those little gaps that tell you someone's bandwidth is running out. When we saw new contractor payments pop up in the general ledger, higher level, higher dollar amount, controller type payments, we had a feeling change was coming again. You get used to reading the clues in the numbers. Sure enough, within a couple of weeks, we received a new meeting request introducing a controller level consultant who would now oversee accounting operations. The CFO wasn't leaving. In fact, he was moving up within the company. It made sense that he needs someone in that controller seat. But every time the internal chart shifted, there was a new gap. New communication paths had to be rebuilt, new calendars to align, and new preferences to learn. We've been with this company long enough to know how these gaps play out. For a few weeks at a time, someone forgets how invoices get approved, or which vendor code goes where, and what day of the month AR normally closes. So we did what we always have done, just kept the rhythm alive. The calendar we had built with our original contact all the way at the start of the engagement, it stayed the same. That was our month-end close calendar, and everyone who came in after inherited it. People were aware of the deadlines, and they sent over what we needed before the cutoff, and that consistency helped more than anything else. The new controller came in with a firm hand, strong ideas, and a lot of energy. Execution, though, is always the hardest part when the ground underneath you keeps moving. It's not that people weren't capable, they were. It's just that turnover keeps resetting progress. There was a big gap in client-facing work for a while, especially around that invoicing. Invoices weren't going out on the same cadence, and that affects everything downstream: AR, cash flow, even morale. And the reason for that gap? Well, the in-house accounting team, the two accounting contractors I talked about before, they quit. Because we'd seen every version of this process from the outside, we had perspective for the new controller. We could suggest refinements that didn't require a full rebuild, things like let's lock in billing on a consistent day every cycle, or let's freeze change orders past a certain date so billing stays predictable. Small, manageable tweaks that made a big difference when you're trying to regain that rhythm. We also were able to help with a bit of the invoice generation and queuing up payables until replacements were eventually hired. None of it was glamorous, it's just the steady work that we do, knowing the company's habits well enough to keep the music playing between its conductors. All of this was taking place years ago, but it's still one of those engagements I think about because it proves a point. Stability isn't always about control. Sometimes it's about being the only team that remembers what normal used to look like. As time went on, though, the consulting company didn't stabilize. If anything, things got worse. When the new controller came in, they reinstated the company's internal KPI tracking, something that had been paused during the transitions. That meant every invoice, every sale, and every line of income now needed to be tagged, allocated, and classified by the internal team so management could run performance by class. It was a big lift both operationally and historically because we had to revise the past entries and rebuild those class structures, then align the ledger to their new internal frameworks. It was tedious work, but we got it done. The system became more granular, more traceable, more measurable. But measurement isn't always the same thing as momentum. The company now had that deeper visibility it wanted, but the visibility didn't automatically turn into an improvement. And that's not criticism, it's just reality. Numbers can only reflect what's already happening. They can't fix the fundamental underlying problems by themselves. From our side, we did what we always do. We kept the data clean, the classifications accurate, and the books dependable. But it was clear the company was still struggling. Revenue stayed high, but profitability continued to dip. And as the months rolled on, you can sense the weight of it across the organization, quieter meetings, delayed initiatives, and longer pauses between big decisions. By mid-year, it became obvious that the company was winding down. And eventually, it did. The doors closed about 7 or 8 months into that fiscal year. We've been engaged with them for about 2.5 years, and when it ended quietly. Everything was reconciled, finalized, and ready for closure. No scramble, no mess, just a clean handoff to history. That's the strange privilege of bookkeeping. you see both the rise and the fade, and you help write both with the same level of care, sometimes the story doesn't end in a turnaround. Sometimes it just ends cleanly. And that's okay, because that's what being the constant really means.